Welcome to Accidental Salesforce Admins, the podcast for change makers who took ownership of business systems when no one else would. I'm your host, Robert Sur, founder and CEO of Delegate. And today we're tackling a frustration that I think every accidental admin knows all too well. Why does it feel like everyone else in the company gets what they need while you're left firefighting with duct tape systems and zero budget? Sales gets new tools, marketing gets more budget, IT gets security investments. But when you ask for resources to clean up a mess, improve processes, or actually make systems work, you get told that there's no budget left. So, how do you change that? How do you get leadership to actually listen and fund the things that will make a real impact? That's where today's guest comes in. Elvis Ha is the VP of product at Paradox, where he builds AI driven hiring solutions. But here's why this matters for us accidental admins. Great product managers like Elvis don't just build software. They know how to position ideas, align teams, and get resources for what actually moves the business forward. And that's exactly what accidental admins need to make sure their priorities don't get ignored. Today, we'll break down how to apply the same thinking so you can stop fighting for scraps and start building real momentum. Elvis, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Rob.
I've known you for a long time. Admins know what's broken. Leaderships maybe don't prioritize it. You and I both learned early on in our career that just doing good work isn't enough. Just knowing what needs to get done isn't enough. You have to make people care about it. So, what's your go to approach been for getting leadership to say yes to the things that actually matter?
That's a great point, Rob. And I've been at a few different organizations, and it's not always the same way to approach it. Some organizations are very leadership centric. They have a specific culture in mind. They embody that culture. Other companies are extremely customer centric. Maybe so much so that they call those customers clients, and then they're client centric. We want to make our clients raving fans, and you have to be able to tap into what matters in your organization and find the way for your priority to speak to what's going to make the biggest impact at your business. I've been at product teams and businesses where endless reinvention and being on the cutting edge of what's latest and greatest is the most important thing. I've also been at companies where outcomes and solving problems for clients is the most important. And I think that anytime you can tie your win back to one of those things directly or indirectly, I think that's when it's going to make the biggest splash. I also think that, a culture of a company is multi-threaded, right? The CEO, the C-suite is going to be different than what a
Yeah,
director thinks, what a VP
100%.
thinks, right? And I know that something that you do very well is you're very good at cultivating relationships, and you have got to be able to do that at a multi-threaded, multi-level, multi-persona basis, I think, and speak to those different levels. Is that something that I think that's something that we've had experience with.
It strikes me from the way you talk about this that this maybe wasn't a flip the switch, you understood this. It feels like it's been a journey to kind of master this approach.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, one thing is that, Rob, you're my first mentor and first into product management. So when I started in product management, that was year zero of my product career, and we're here now, 10 years, maybe almost 2 decades later, and every year you learn something different. Every situation, every initiative, you learn something different, and it's very humbling when you think when you think you have something figured out, and you're plopped into a brand new situation. Either the company's different, the people are different, the politics are different, the values are different, the economy is different. Everything can be different, and you have to
Yeah,
be able to learn back to square one. Yeah.
totally. And you mentioned that, I was kind of foray into product management. For those of you listening, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm pretty sure Elvis has gotten to where he's gotten to in spite of me being his first foray into product. But I appreciate the shout out, man. I tried to do the best that I could to set you up for success. You mentioned a little bit of a mindset here, right? This understanding that you're never gonna like you're always gonna learn, right? We're never gonna understand it. And the situation might be different at every company. I've noticed that mindset or that perspective to be a key ingredient for successful people, regardless of their title or their role. Sales, product, operations, Salesforce, engineering, business systems, you name it. You've built some teams. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that you develop your superpower. I've listened. I'm a fan of the podcast. I've listened to the podcast, and I think that developing, what your brand is all about and what wins and what impact you're all about. That's definitely something to establish. But you have to be able to reinvent yourself because the technology changes, the initiatives change, the climate changes. And you have to be able to adapt to where the puck is going, so to speak. And you also so it's that balance because you know a lot of people are going to criticize you or want something different of you than of who you are, and you have to have the wherewithal to know when are you needing to stick strong to who you
Yes,
are and what
100%.
you bring to the table, but also when do you have to listen to know that the audience is wanting you to evolve and to adapt to the changing times.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I think that understanding is why you've been so successful. Talk to me about, so going back to this idea of, you know, uh, this idea that getting leadership buy-in is it depends, right? So your answer to that was around the fact that it really depends at what elevation or what type of stakeholder you're talking to, at what elevation. It might depend on company culture or what the company strategy is. And tying that back into, you know, how important it is to always have an open mind to learn, this humility to wanting to learn. I think that all ties in beautifully to what we're talking about in terms of getting leadership buy-in. It's all related. So talk to me about a time where, I mean, look, you've worked across product, AI. Getting buy-in is everything when it comes to product. And as for the listeners that don't know, product management is a function that essentially drives what, product improvements, what features, what new products get investment, right? What the company decides to pour money and resources into. So buy-in is everything. Can you share a time when you had to push leadership to fund a specific project or feature? What worked? What didn't work? What'd you learn?
I found myself in that position a few times, as have you, and we have both worked in situations where we've been in public companies, in startups. We've been in situations where we had the ear of the CEO, and situations where you haven't had the ear of the CEO. I'll talk about a situation in my previous company where the growth was slowing a little bit, and we had to really innovate and really adapt and almost pivot and evolve like what the enterprise product category was in order to survive. And I think it's really important to be able to distill like what it is that the market wants, what it is that the analysts want, what it is that the way technology is going, and in the case of enterprise where consumerization is going. And when you can speak to how all of that aligns together, like especially if you can have one aspect of your pitch or what you're trying to drive or your proposal that can speak and you know get everyone wanting the same thing, that
Yeah.
can be very powerful. I've had that in my past. And we're here again, like we're in this new dawn of AI. And I think that creating a sense of urgency to innovate around AI is something where I'm certainly using lessons learned from the past, the good and the bad, to approach it this time. And this time, my approach is certainly to think about all of there's so many exciting solutions. In fact, so many solutions, new tools, new models,
Hmm.
new processes, and ways of working coming out at the time. Actually, there can be a surplus of solutions in search of a problem. And what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to see what the buyer is ready for, what the market is ready for. in the enterprise space, what the analysts are looking for, what consumer sentiment is looking for. And every time you can think, again, that theme of being multi-threaded, if you can see that common through line of what's going to work best in that multi-threaded fashion, I think that's the way to do it. And how are you going to get there? How are you going to identify that? One is you can become a master of your domain and a master of your industry. You can know your market, you can know your market segments, you can know your buyers incredibly well. But there's also an aspect of it where you have to talk to people. You have to
Yeah.
really get to know. You have to go through the reps. You have to see what lands, what doesn't land, and help you distill and get that. So iteration is definitely a part of the game.
What's interesting about, you know, our audience and accidental admins and product managers, I think too, I've had the privilege to kind of sit in both seats here, is that, I think about that scene in Office Space. Like, what is it you actually do here? Based on what you described, it sounds like a huge part of your job is to kind of just make sense of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you're trying to get something and instill change, that could be as an entrepreneur. It can also be as an entrepreneur. And I believe that many of these accidental Salesforce admins and people in biz ops are entrepreneurs. And I think that key
Change
skill of
makers.
change makers, change
Yeah.
agents, absolutely. And a key skill of that is the ability to distill and to articulate that vision. And if you really understand your vision, and if you really understand how to articulate that vision from the technical level to the tactical level to different heads of
Correct.
business lines to different departments, all the way up to the executives and all the way up again to the clients, the customers, like that's really going to unlock a lot for you. And I know there's so many intelligent people out there who know what's best, but they don't know yet how to say it the best. They don't know how to say it in that way that is gonna drop the mic, that is gonna get everyone on board, and I think it takes a lot of skill building to get to there. But again, through iteration, you'll start to understand like when you're getting closer, and you'll it's all about getting closer and closer to it.
Talk to me about one of the projects you've worked on, or one of the initiatives you worked on that you're like the most proud of, where you did get a mic drop moment after you walked away from a pitch or a presentation.
Yeah, this could be a story that's good for this audience, which is something extremely technical. I had a director of product management who was reporting to me, a real technical person, not the most elevated in terms of soft skills or relationship making, and she really wanted to push this technical infrastructure project, and could use a little help, pulling the threads together for a compelling vision. And I combined this technical project that was proposed to me with our competitive differentiator, which was large distribution, and combine that to make some competitive advantage in terms of like this technical infrastructure project, helping solve the cold start problem in machine learning for a key initiative. And that's actually what helped give us a huge differentiator in the market. And that's a great example because a lot of times we think about something tactical, something technical, something foundational as so important. But I've heard this on your podcast before, is like you got to use the analogy, and you have to connect the dots and the analogy together and really elevate that proposal to truly become something that could be market defining.
Yeah, and what I really like about that example, and we see it all the time, as accidental admins, is like, how do I get someone care about these really technical projects that like are critically important to the organization? It's just this is a common term we throw around. They just don't get it. They just don't get it. It's so easy to get frustrated and go to lunch and just they just don't get it. But what I like about this is you guided that director or that member of your team to find something to latch onto, right? This strategy that you mentioned, right, of distribution, right, to be able to tie it to that, to latch onto that, right, as a priority, I think was really, really profound and good leadership by you. I think another thing we talk about here too is, at the end of the day, like, part of our job is just to find common ground, and it's hard to find common ground without common language, right? And
Mhm.
so I can't tell you how many times I've seen I guess, more generally more junior folks, and even myself in the early age, try and show off how smart I am by bringing in the most technically beautiful framework or solution to a leadership meeting, thinking that, hey, if I do a good job, people are going to notice. And so I'm glad you shared that, because I'm sure you've had experiences like that as well.
Yeah, and hey, you can always code switch. You just have to be able to code switch. You have to be
Yes.
able to show your
Yes.
technical chops. You have to be able to show your soft skills chops. That's what it's about, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And why we emphasize our deep five framework so much, right? To be able to see through those lenses and speak through those languages, and like, as the kids say, code switch. Uh, for sure. For sure. I think that's super, super important. Hey, if an accidental admin listening to this episode wants to get leadership's attention and actually wants to get, their projects prioritized, or to secure funding for things that they feel is really important in the organization, what's the first thing they should do?
You got to find out what people care about. And
Yes.
there's, people want the cheat code, right? I mean, people want the cheat code. So here's what I can give in terms of the cheat code is like, what are people going to find remarkable? What are people going to find lovable? What are people going to find valuable? If you can figure what that is, that's probably the right direction. But again, every situation is different. It's going to take time. Like if you're going to lunch, you're saying, man, like no one gets it. Actually, you're the one that doesn't get it. You're the one that has to go talk to more people and understand where people are coming from and figure out what how it is that you can tie it back to what matters.
Yeah, I think we've joked about, peek behind the curtain here. We've joked about my Korean temper a lot as we both as we both matured as adults here. But once you get kind of past your own ego and your own frustrations that you're feeling, what I've found is that, most of your stakeholders and coworkers, like, they want they want to be helped. Like, we kind of want the same things more than we realize.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there are politics at play. Sometimes you may even want the same thing, and someone just doesn't jive, and that sucks. But I think commonly, especially when you're working with other high performers, you gotta be able to with people that make you upset, or people that give you shade, or people that work conspire against you in the organization. It doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, you guys are professionals, and hopefully you can see eye to eye how we can mutually help each other, how we can ultimately want success. I mean, if you're at a startup, what you ultimately want is, you want to build a great company. And if you're in a public company, you want to you're at a great company, you want to make that company better. I mean,
Yeah.
that's at the end of the day. And again, in this, hugely customer centric culture that we have in this market, you want your customers to be successful. Everybody wants those same things. I think people have different philosophies of how to get that, but
Of course.
if you can show that, and you can get on the same page, that's
Yes.
what you're achieving, then I
Yes.
think that's the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I what you just said, right? Like, people have different ways of, thinking of how to get there. And what I think you've done really on your career, and what I think accidental admins can do, to drive a ton of value, not for their organization, for themselves, is be the one that finds the common ground. Be the one that sees all this chaos with people speaking in different languages, valuing different things, seeing the world a little bit differently. Tie it all together. If you can be the one, right, that facilitates this common ground, I mean, you know, not only will you get the priorities that you want funded, the company will start coming to you and asking you what they should do next. And that's the goal, right? And that's what I think, most high achievers and high performers want. If you had a let's just say one of your employees, one of your product members was super excited about, this new priority, this new feature that they wanted to get off the ground. They came to you with, you know, a lot of energy, like super excited, which is what you want to see in everybody. But there's like a clear lack of, as you mentioned earlier, understanding of their stakeholders and of their users, right? Like this was clearly in the mind of like, they had tunnel vision. What is like three things that a checklist of three things you'd tell them to do before your next one-on-one?
Yeah, I almost always think it's as from a lack of context of that common ground. Maybe it could be common ground at their level. Maybe it can be common ground at a higher level. And the higher up you get, if you become a leader, if you become a director, a VP, a C-suite, you're going at each level, you're going to get a better and better lens of the bigger picture. So, I mean, of course, feel like I want people to come to go to their leaders, go to people they trust, and get an understanding of what that common ground at the bigger picture is level is. But that common ground is so important, and it totally, if you're an accidental Salesforce admin, and you're wondering like why is what can there be to learn from a product manager. I think that one of the things that is often said about product management is, or at least this is how product managers like to characterize themselves, is it's not what you're thinking. It's not that we call ourselves the mini CEO. It's that the product manager is thought of as the hub at the center of the wheel. We're connected to all the spokes of the wheel. But what I am learning more and more in today's world is that we're getting so cross functional. We're getting so much about project based teams, not
Yes.
function based teams. All of us are becoming hubs at the center and connected to all these spokes of the wheel. And I think that's what it is that you pointed out with the common ground is, are you, maybe you're closer to engineering, maybe you're closer to go to market or to your clients and customers. A lot of people tend to be on one side or the other. I recommend that you you become the hub and you become plugged in. You got to be tapped in to what the other departments are feeling. You got to be tapped into what the other departments value. What are their troubles? And I guarantee you'll start to see a clearer picture the more you do that. And you have to have empathy for those departments, because when you really develop the empathy for what other departments are going through, that's when you truly become the hub, at the center and connected to all these spokes of the wheel. So that's almost always, I think, the first step. And it's not an immediate step. You're not gonna get it all done in a day, but I guarantee it will bring results.
Yeah, is that's really really good insight. I remember a t- I remember a time where one of our really high performers now, one of our senior leaders now, when we first found him, this was when we it was when we were first starting the company, and I was bringing on contractors where I could find them just to kind of throw them onto these calls, and because I was running out of capacity on my own sense to kind of deliver to customers. And I remember we were on with, I think it was like a CMO of one of our clients, and during kind of our weekly call, he pulled up a console with his Apex code and was running her through all the cool changes that he made to the lines of code. And we laugh about it now. But afterwards, I realized like, oh, okay, like there's some enthusiasm. There's a good mindset to want to learn and a work ethic here, but we gotta work with them here. So what I ended up doing is I actually gave him three very tactical, like, hey, the next time I talk to you, here's what I want to see. Right. And so I gave him three tasks. Number one, all right, you have on this account, we have basically three stakeholders. We have marketing, we have sales, we have customer success. Okay. First task, write what, just hypothesize, brainstorm. Write me five things for each of our stakeholders that you think they care about. Write them out. It could be personally, could be professionally. Just write down sentences, right, of five things that you think that they care about. Next thing I want you to do is I want you to grab, it could be virtual coffee, is we're a virtual company, but hey, one member of each team, three people, right? Grab coffee with them. I don't even care what you talk about. Just just go grab coffee with them, right? Now come back to the step one of the hypotheses you had about what you think they cared about and revise them. Tell me what you think now. And I think, granted, there's much more beneath the surface that he needed to learn about those specific stakeholders, but just getting that muscle started, right? Just getting them to feel like what it means to flex that muscle, I think is critical, and something that, again, I know I'm still mastering this in terms of getting to understand my stakeholders and my users, and what elevation to play at, and what culturally is important to everybody. Like sometimes I even, and I'm sure you do it too, we've seen so much that we just make assumptions. It's like, we don't, let's skip this step. I just assume that they're in this pattern, and your pattern recognition does get better, but it's a muscle that, for our listeners, if you haven't started that, just get started. It's okay. It's gonna, like anything else, it's gonna take time, but getting started is the hardest part. And so I think a lot of what you talked about today, I think, lends itself to giving, I guess, permission to the listeners, like, go do it. I think people want to hear from you. People want to build bridges across different departments, and especially as we're becoming we're becoming, I guess, more project based rather than functional silos. Like, I think this is more, my biggest learning is this is more embraced by people in other departments than I actually realized. Like, people want this. And so I think that was really helpful. Hey, look, not every pitch goes smoothly. I know I've fallen on my face a couple of times around this, or I've also had some really wild reactions around certain things. Have you ever had a moment where, a priority or a project that you wanted, that you pitched, was totally rejected, or or where maybe a leadership's response like completely shocked you?
Oh, absolutely. I've had just as many proposals fall flat, and in fact, like maybe strain relationships because I even propose it. I've had some real hard knocks before, and I should have listened to that advice that you gave your employee of, like, really think about what people stand for, and what they want. And I should have done that. I joined a company, and maybe like a year or a year and a half in, this concept of, like, just, I think, like, hitting scale at a company is one of these things that always is going to strain. Is like, you have this upstart mentality, do things that don't scale, and whenever you try to suggest something that's maybe a little bit more, it could be anything. And there's actually multiple times where I maybe wanted to go from B2B to try to go for a B2C play, go from all enterprise sales to a PLG play, product led growth play, go from bespoke implementation to self-service implementation. Anytime that you try to push one of these things, and I pushed these things multiple times at different environments without really doing flexing that muscle that you mentioned, where I suggested something when it wasn't time to do that, because the culture of the company, the culture of the leadership, the stage of the company was not the right environment. And that's when something you can suggest is actually could be a good idea at another time in another place, but not right now, not right
Yeah.
here. And that's lessons learned as well. And if you feel like you're at one of those situations, at one of those times, that's okay too, because times change, the things change all the time. So if that's if something that you're all about is not exactly in the right environment, you can be patient, and maybe things will turn as well.
Yes. I think patience is really critical in what you said. It looks like, I mean, I noticed, you know, it's really demoralizing when we get said no to, right? It really doesn't feel good. How have you maybe dealt with some of that frustration? I'm sure it hasn't always been smooth sailing, but how do you deal with it? What are things you've learned in terms of when some of the no's came, right? We kind of learn more from some of the no's than we do the yeses, right? Talk me through how, you've been able to turn that maybe into more positive experiences down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about this probably a lot in a lot of fields, but the you don't learn without the no. It is very painful in the moment, but after you come out the other side, and you retrospect, everyone that has built success, everyone that has done a lot of reps, a lot of hours, and done something, when you see them on stage, or when you see their success from afar, you don't see it. What you see is, you see a polished product, you see a polished pitch, you see someone who's so charismatic and refined. But what all of those people will tell you is that there were so many no's and failures along the
Totally.
way. That's how you get here. And the thing is like, if you go through your entire career or your entire life and you never get into that situation, I think that's an indicator that you weren't bold enough. Anything that anyone does that is going to instill change as a change agent, that is going to have a massive impact, there's always going to be a naysayer. There's always going to be haters. And learning how to learn from that, learning how to win them over, learning how to refine your approach so that you have a winning approach that shuts down the naysayers and the haters. That is a part of the game. So it's something where in the moment, man, it sucks. Every time it still happens, man. I get in a foul mood, but you have to know that it's a part of the process.
Yeah, and I don't think you get to where where you're at in your career without turning those no's and turning those failures into successes, and most importantly, not letting it, take all the wind out of your sails, right? And I think obviously we're human, we feel all the things, but at the same time, to be able to continue to pick yourself back up and still be open to learning, right? Still be open to figuring out the different approaches that it takes at different companies to get your projects prioritized, figuring out like, you know, how to communicate or what matters to different people and different cultures. Like we got to keep doing that no matter how many times we get knocked down. And I think you're definitely proof of someone who's been able to do that. So I want to end with, one key piece of, I guess, Elvis trivia that people don't know about. You studied psychology in college. Am I correct?
Psychology courses were a part of my degree, neuroscience.
Oh, neuroscience. Oh, my bad.
Hey,
It's
it's a BA in neuroscience, which is that's the trivia that I don't want people to know. That is a BA. It's not a
but,
BS.
it's interesting, right? Because, at our first organization, we were like classic 2000s enterprise, software company, right? And, you know, I I think obviously now you find yourself being able to work in AI, which is, I think it's super cool. And I'm sure there were times, at previous stops in your career where you felt passionately about maybe the neuroscience psychology part of, building products. And I assume maybe, the companies weren't ready to hear all that. But now being able to be in a position where you can you know, kind of dive into that interest and that background that you have, I think that's a really cool part of your story.
Yeah, that's thanks for that. And neuroscience has always been somewhat applicable because when you think about what software experiences people are going to enjoy, the aspects of neuroscience, cognitive load, work into user experience. So it's not never been irrelevant. And now in the age of AI, knowing a little bit about neuroscience has definitely been interesting. What's actually fascinating about AI is that AI is teaching us about the human brain as much as the human brain is teaching us how to make good AI. And when there's an unlock with AI, like things like, hey, like there's this old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's always made sense as a human saying. But now when you think about training multimodal models and more parameters being in an image or in a video than in being text, and that actually speaks to the human experience too. So it's insane. And now we're in conversational AI, and with ChatGPT, so popular and everything like that. Like conversational AI is so much at the forefront of what I do. And now that I have a son, he's learning how to speak. I'm seeing from his evolution and his rapid just learning, words and learning how to communicate. It is this intrinsic and delightful thing that every human, every being wants to do, is to communicate through conversation. And so yeah, it's been wild. And the back to the audience of the Accidental Salesforce Admin, you might not be a neuroscience person, but tap into your passion, tap
Yes.
into your knowledge, because that's that's the way that you're going to find that common ground with people, is to bridge where you're coming from with where others are coming from.
I think Gen AI is if listeners aren't using it, you guys should use it for sure. You know, kind of closing this out here, we've talked about the ability to find common ground, the ability to kind of sift through all the information, all the signals that are out there, to be able to then take all of that information and find a compelling language, right? Find the motivations, the outcomes of the different stakeholders involved, to really put together this narrative, right? This story that essentially gets you what you want. Right? And I definitely think people should use Gen AI to help come up with these things, but it's going to be on, it's going to be on every individual, all the accidental admins out there. You have to take the time to understand, as Elvis explained, right? Like, what card are you going to play, right? What kind of company culture are you in? Which elevation are you talking to people at? What does the messaging have to be? What language do you need to use? All those things are super important. And I think Elvis, as a VP of product at a pretty, I guess, at this stage in your career, and doing some really, really cool stuff, I really appreciate you sharing your insights with our audience. Where can people find your work and learn more about you?
Yeah, listen to this podcast. I might be on this podcast again if Rob is gonna welcome me back into the mic, and find me on LinkedIn. We might drop a blog post in the episode as well if you want to read some of my writing.
Awesome. We'll link that in the notes of this episode. If you're listening, go connect with Elvis. Check out what he's building at Paradox. And if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with a fellow admin who needs to hear this, and connect with me on LinkedIn for more insights. Thank you all for listening. See you next time.